We are back from a 1 month absence, which I will give a thorough explanation for, and my thoughts on the red wave, and also the opposition to the COVID regime. I am BC, and this is the State of Dissidence podcast, live. Welcome back, fellow dissidents. So, I've been gone for a little over a month, and as of my last episode, another strike was added to my channel. And as I stated in that video, I didn't know if they were going to retroactively go back and check on my content and see what exactly was in there that was striking the new guidelines or whatever the new terms of service, whatever happened with YouTube. They've started retroactively taking down content. So now I have the one warning, which I appealed and was successful, and they put the video back up. And then I got another warning, which the appeal failed, and they deleted that video. And then shortly after I uploaded the last video, they gave me another strike and deleted another video. So they retroactively took down my content. They went back into my old content and they took it down. Now, it's actually quite odd. You can go to Rumble and see the episodes that are missing from the playlist. You can see they jump from, I think it's number 14 and 12 or something like that. But you can go to Rumble and you can listen to the actual content of what I said, and it's nothing of what I have said is nothing that people like Tim Pool or Michael Malice or Dave Smith or even conservatives like Steven Crowder have said. Now, obviously, Steven Crowder has gotten a strike in a week ban or whatever, and I also had to sustain, because of the full strike, I had to sustain a 1 week ban. But it's weird though, because nothing of what I said, none of the content, not even me discussing compliance and such, should have been able to get my content stricken from YouTube, but they did it anyways. It's probably because I don't have a large enough following to where it would revoke or provoke, any kind of reaction that would backlash YouTube itself. I mean, I'm literally a nobody, and that may be why it took so long for them to retroactively get to my content. Nevertheless, it definitely left me an opportunity to think about the situation. I thoroughly love doing this. I love political philosophy. I love keeping up with politics and talking about politics. But I also have to figure out, because this is the only platform where I can get people to engage with the content at all. And it seems to be doing fairly well. I mean, it's not, it's not a prevalent podcast, but this is the entire reason why I'm switching it up. I want to change my strategy. But it took me a while to figure out what exactly I want to do with this. Because if I literally cannot speak my mind on this platform. So, I had time to think about it. I had, and it wasn't even supposed to be this long of a time off. I ended up being sick for 2 weeks. I'm at the tail end of it now. I'm not even entirely sure what it was. I mean, I went to the doctor and they said, I wasn't COVID, and they said I had an upper respiratory infection and such. But people that have by proxy been around me, they haven't been around me, but they've been around like my daughter and such, and my daughter was sick as well, and she was tested negative. but there's people that have been around her as well that have tested positive for COVID. So it's, I'm not entirely sure. The testing is not even entirely accurate anyways, but nevertheless, I was extremely sick. I had to take time off of work, and sure, I could have still live streamed, but who wants to see me sit here sniffling and coughing the entire time? That doesn't seem appealing at all. But nevertheless, that is where I'm at with it. I'm not entirely sure how this is gonna go, or how long my channel will last here on YouTube, or if I'll continue if I end up getting stricken from YouTube entirely. I'm not entirely sure, but I've decided to change the strategy. Rather than pre-recording my content and then uploading it, I'm going to aim for one stream a week, and then I'll clip other parts of it and upload it to social media and obviously to YouTube as well. But yeah, that's where that stands. I even said in that video that it's very well possible that they will retroactively strike my content because of my stance on compliance, which is a fairly common stance at this point in this country. It's not like my thoughts on compliance are radical. I mean, I have a lot of radical political views, but compliance to what's going on in our country is not one of them. It's held by a lot of people, but nevertheless, as of late news, there's been elections held, obviously, and it's fairly, for someone like me, obviously I'm an anarchist. I don't believe in democracy. I don't believe that my rights should be up for a vote, nor yours, nor anybody's, not even my opposition. I don't believe that democracy works. I mean, I see everybody discussing this theoretical red wave because, there was Republicans elected in unlikely spaces. And, it's obviously predicted that the House and Senate will switch red to Republicans. And, I mean, obviously this is theoretical at this point. We don't know. But it looks as though people are fed up with the Democratic Party. And their disdain is open, and people see it. And most people believe that their only option is to vote, and to vote for the other party. Now, obviously, we have third parties, but the Libertarian Party can't be taken seriously. Only the Mises Caucus is worth a damn at this point. So, that for most folks, you either get one or the other of the duopoly. And it's just not the case. It's not the case. You don't have to comply with democracy. You engaging in that system. I don't fault anybody for it. But the ineptitude of the understanding of our political system is shown through and through. If you look through the history of even just my lifetime, like I've said before, I'll be 33 in less than a week, okay? And just in my lifetime, it has shifted Democrat and Republican back and forth, right? I mean, a majority of it has been Democrats, between Bill Clinton and Obama, and now Biden. But nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. There is a swing in our system, and I think that correlates less to competency, but rather to the lack of choice. There's this fallacy that if we vote in Republicans, that everything will change. But as I've stated, there's been an equilibrium through the entire history of the two-party system. And if it bounces back and forth and we still have a gigantic federal government and a gigantic bureaucracy state, regardless of who's in power, then needless to say, it doesn't matter who's in. And sure, I'll take the incrementalism. I hear people saying, I just was talking with a man on my Facebook page. All the links to my social medias are below. By all means, please join them. There's a decent amount of content in them, mainly shit posting for memes, but it invokes conversation occasionally. And I was talking with a man today, and just the lack of knowledge of people. And this isn't even bashing him, but the lack of knowledge of our political system is just astounding. He asserted that the red wave should be attributed to Trump, and that Trump is not your norm. It's not part of the norm, and that times are changing. And then he went on to say that he's the head of the legislative branch. And I'm just blown away by this. I've often, maybe I haven't stated my opposition to Trump well enough. The most I say is that it's a low bar to beat Biden, and this is the case. To be better than Joe Biden is like the lowest bar ever, besides some of the previous presidents, Lyndon Baines Johnson and others. But nevertheless, the fact that this man thought that the president was leading the legislative branch, and these are the kinds of people that are voting, it just shows you that it's just tribal team sports. This is what I think of the theoretical red wave. I don't think it's anything to be commended. Do I hope that there are small government Republicans that will at least be a speed bump to Democrats? Sure, I guess. But I'm not a statist. I don't believe any part of the state is coherent or competent. I don't believe that we need a government to make society better. As a matter of fact, I think it hampers it. I mean, this is why I always encourage people to engage in reading, or even you can get the stuff on tape now. You can get Rothbard on ebooks. There's no excuse not to engage in political philosophy or any kind of books for that matter. But it's like we should at least have an understanding of the structure of our government. When voters who are convinced that Trump is the savior say that he is leading the legislative branch because he's the head of the GOP, I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd. These are the people that vote. You can ask people, what are the 3 branches of government, and maybe 2/3 will get it. It's like this. I don't think that a red wave is inevitable, although likely it is, but I don't think it's inevitable. And I'm not going to advocate for it to be a good thing. It's just a state is a state is a state. It is what it is. I don't believe that voting R all the way down the ballot is the answer. This is why I at least try to get people to think in more libertarian terms. Am I a libertarian? Sure. I'm a radical libertarian. Absolutely I am. But I don't engage in politics. I don't, at an actual political level. I am a contributor to the Mises Caucus. I give them money because I enjoy what they do. A majority of them are Rothbardians like myself, so it makes sense to support at least that movement. But as for voting or anything of that matter, I don't. At a local level, I try the best I can to keep an eye on my daughter's schooling and such, to make sure that she's not learning critical race praxis and race essentialism and things of this nature. I don't believe that children should be taught that. So when it comes down to all of that, sure, at a local level, I keep an eye on my surroundings, but I don't engage. And sure, maybe I'm part of the problem. Maybe I'm part of the problem. But I think it starts with individuals. Everybody these days has been trained in terms of the collective. You are considered selfish if you don't sacrifice your own needs for somebody else. It's funny, after this last month off, I've been doing a lot of heavy reading. I reread Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, and she denounced anarchism mostly because of Rothbard, but she was at best a radical libertarian. She believed in objectivism. If everybody observes their self and as individuals, and they strive for their own needs, that the entire collective by default raises, prospers as a collective. Because if everybody is striving to do their absolute best, then society prospers as a whole. But as soon as you start thinking of other people's needs and you disregard your own needs, that's when things start to disintegrate, right? So, I actually reread all the seminal Rothbard, for New Liberty, Ethics of Liberty, and I just recently somebody purchased it for my birthday. He was a historian as well as a political philosopher. He was many things. The man was a genius. But also somebody bought it for me for my birthday. Conceived in Liberty. It's the entire history of, what is it? It's the 17th century and the 18th century, and through basically the leading up to the revolution, and then through the revolution, as well as the revolutionary period and shortly afterwards. Plus, I believe I'm getting another birthday present soon, which he had another, the progressive era, the history of it. And, I also, on social media, I follow a lot of agorists. Agorists are, they're anti-politics. They believe in absolutely abstaining from politics. So maybe I'm part of the solution. I'm not an agorist, but I certainly agree with their worldview, because politics are detrimental at best to society. I mean, it's a literal division, and this is part of the problem. People think that this new cultural Marxism has all these divisions, and it's actually only one division, which is identity. And politics is just another identity. You either identify as a Republican or Libertarian or a Democrat or whatever. But this cultural Marxism, they've got it so deeply ingrained into the collective conscious that people believe that there's all these subdivisions and there's all these reasons to divide ourselves, and politics is one of those. I mean, the agorists are actually onto something. They are out to self-sustain. They want to be, based. I don't know if all of them want to be off of the grid, but the majority of what I see, they want to have self-sustainable gardens and farms and such, and they want to be away from the people. Because if society keeps going this way, I mean, who knows what will happen? Who knows what will happen? And it's crazy. Okay, a great segue. Okay, into the opposition to the COVID regime. People are being labeled as domestic terrorists, right, for engaging in their child's curriculum. Democrats and liberals and whatever they want to identify as, they are saying that you're not a teacher. You are a parent. You shouldn't have any say in your child's curriculum. So you mean to tell me that because I don't want my child indoctrinated, that makes me a domestic terrorist? Well, sign me up for being a domestic terrorist then, I guess. I don't consider myself one. Do I consider myself an advocate of abolition of the state? Yes, I do. Do I think my daughter should not be indoctrinated by the government? Yes, I do. But it's funny, though, because people know I'm radical. I'm public about, I'm very, very public about, how radical my views are. And it's only radical to normal folks, to the status quo. It's only radical to those kinds of folks. But, my daughter's mother is completely apolitical, right? I won't speak about her personal business, but she is absolutely apolitical, right? But she's objectively considered the options when it comes to vaccination for our child. And we have both discussed it. And also when it comes to like race essentialism and such, like I'm more than positive she doesn't want her child thinking that she's automatically racist and evil because of the color of her skin. Now, I haven't discussed that part with her, but I've known her for about a decade. I'm pretty sure this is the case, right? But we've discussed enough to where I've gotten insight, and we're on the same page. She's completely apolitical. But if you were to ask these people, the Democrats and the far leftists or whatever, she would be a domestic terrorist. The Attorney General is saying that they're going to continue investigations into people who are questioning the curriculum and coming to the meetings and such, because they believe that these are domestic terrorists. It's not because they actually believe that. They don't actually think that we're domestic terrorists. We're a threat to their power. Their indoctrination centers, the public school system. This is why, school of choice is never on the docket. And this is why that's one of the reasons they hated Trump, is because he was, trying to advocate for school of choice. There's not many great things that I say about Trump, but one of them is certainly his school of choice. I mean, why would you have any problem with parents choosing where they send their child, unless you had some sort of agenda? It certainly seems like there is an agenda. And this opposition, if you were to only watch the corporate news, you wouldn't have any idea what kind of opposition is out there. But if you choose to engage with actual, do your own research, and not the kind of research, that people think that researching and fact checking is Google. that's not fact. Like, I have complete, like, I will ask for a definition from Google and such, but if I'm looking for objective reasoning and articles and news and such, I use DuckDuckGo. I don't even use Google unless it's like for something that is like objective reality, something that's not political, can't be politicized. It's blatantly obvious that there's not a big tech company around that doesn't have a political agenda that leans left. And it's funny. People think that I've gone off my rockers because I've went from being libertarian to radically libertarian to anarchist inside of, what would seem like to somebody else, it seems like it's happened within inside of a year. Because when I started this channel, you can go back, you can see the incubation episodes where I was still, I'm very introverted. I've said this before. I'm inherently introverted. So speaking these ideas out loud is something very new to me, especially on a public platform such as this where anybody can access it. But in the beginning, I was trying to establish, my worldview, but it's different when it's in your head and then when you try to establish it to other people. Right, so I knew for sure that I was inherently libertarian and radically libertarian, right? I knew that much. But that was at the same point, this has been a little less than a year since I started this. But just before what invoked me to start this was I started to search through the anarchist literature again. Because I did this some, 6 years ago, right after me and my daughter's mother split up. And I had read a little bit of Rothbard and some, I forget who else, but Rothbard stuck out in my mind because it made sense. It was just inherently libertarian. I hadn't read Man, Economy, and State yet, but, I didn't know the economic side of it, but I knew inherently that I was libertarian, that there shouldn't be so much government. But I had only heard the anarchist worldview from a few sources and a few times. So I was still indoctrinated. When I came up in a very urban and it was mostly minorities, and I came up in the alternative high school. I was completely indoctrinated, full-blown liberal worldview, full victimhood, the whole nine. It took me a long time of growing as a man, as a person, and politically to understand that I wasn't a victim, that responsibility was on my shoulders, and that, being a ward of the state by proxy of government welfare and such was not the move. That wasn't who I was. That wasn't who I wanted to be. I thought my entire life I have been an outlier. Mainly growing up, I was not really engaged in politics, didn't really have a political view. But as I got older, I started to engage, right? But it was like I had this liberal worldview just drilled into my head as I grew up. And it took me a long time to grow out of that, as well as the drug abuse and the victimhood and everything. It's all intertwined in my worldview, right? But the first enlightenment, I would have had to have been, like 20 years old, around the Ron Paul revolution. And that's when things started to click. He was talking about the Federal Reserve and how the wars were all crap and, just the entire state of the world. And I started to view government differently. I started to think that it wasn't just this essential machine that we needed, because that's what I thought up until that point. I mean, how else am I going to get my welfare stamps? How else am I going to get, I was selling those food stamps for 2-for-1s, that's another income. Why wouldn't I, right? And then I started to realize, obviously I already knew that the drug addiction was inherently bad and that needed to change, and that the responsibility for all of that was on my shoulders. Sure, there's things from my childhood. I was victimized as a child, and, I came up with a moderately poor single mother and my sister. That was our household. So sure, there's things in my childhood, and my father passed away when I was a baby. So it's like, sure, I had all these things from my childhood that I used as a vice to continue using. But there was a time where things had to change, and I knew it. So I started taking more responsibility. And this is what people don't understand about libertarians and anarchists. They believe that our worldview is, we just want to be able to shoot our guns whenever and use drugs however we want. It's more than that. We understand fully the worldview of a libertarian or anarchist. With individual sovereignty comes individual responsibility. We understand this. And that's why most of us believe that you have to have some kind of moral structure before you just abolish the government. Now, if there was a red button that said, proceed with all liberty and no government, I would press that button till my fingers blistered, right? But it's not it is inherently selfish. And I'm trying to get people to understand that this isn't a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be selfish. Now, sure, you have your inner circle of people, your close friends and your family that you maybe take an oath or some kind of unspoken word or knowledge that we help each other. Of course. But how many times has the cliche been said that you can't help someone else unless you can help yourself, right? But in today's society, if you're not acting in terms of the collective, then you're stricken. You're getting solid epithets. Excuse me. And this is not how it should be. This is what I've been thinking of this entire time. What do I want to do with this platform? What is it possible to be done with this platform? I don't know. I can't even talk openly about compliance. Because all I have to say is take a look around the country. Take a look at how people feel about these mandates. 2,000 FDNY, the fire department in New York, 2,000 people called in sick in opposition to the mandates. Now that's just an objective fact. I won't even speak on it. And sure, they have like 300,000 employees, right? So it's a small number, but 2,000 people in New York City. I mean, yeah, that's a fairly small number for that population. But they're not the only ones. They're not the only ones. And you know what really grinds my gears? These pictures from Portland, Seattle, and wherever in the country, in these liberal cities, you got police cars, right? And they're hanging the Gadsden flag out of their windows. The Gadsden flag stands for the revolution, right? So when it was established, it stands for liberty, it stands for freedom, it stands for anti-oppression. The cops are the boot of the governor. People, Republicans and the thin blue line people, they're not going to like hearing this. But the structure of police we have today is oppressive. If you're a 2A advocate, you couldn't possibly believe that the police are the good guys. They're not. They can't be. They lock people away for two. And sure, we need laws. Yes, I will agree. But it should all be private and voluntary. Who opted in to where if you carry a gun without the government say so, they're allowed to lock you away for a decade? Who signed up for that? I didn't. When I was 18, I had a destruction of property case, and they hit me with a felony. And since then, I haven't been able to legally defend myself. Now, who thought that was a good idea? Sure, I broke the law. Absolutely. I paid restitution. I paid my debt to society. Why am I not allowed to own a firearm? Because of an oppressive state. Now, say I were to, even though, let's say theoretically that I'm trained, right? Because I can't say whether I am or I'm not. But let's say I'm trained to a firearm and I practice good safety and gun control and all, self-gun control and all that good jazz, right? Say I were to carry that out in public. What would happen if a police stopped me? They'd take me right to prison. My entire criminal history is essentially arbitrary laws, weed distribution, and destruction of property, with all which I have paid my debt to society. But in the eyes of the state, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They'll lock me away, right? And who enforces these laws? Who's the one who picks me up and takes me to court? The police. The police. And they are oppressive. The more liberal and the more urban the area, the worse the police are. People don't want to hear it, but it is the case. It is the case. It should be. There's no reason why the government. There's nobody doubts at this point that the government does not have our best interest in mind. If you believe the government has our best interest in mind, you're in the wrong place, right? Okay, but they have a monopoly on violence. They pick and choose which rules they would like to enforce and which ones they don't. And who do they use to enforce those laws? And now that they have these mandates in place and any amount of integrity that's left in the police institution, those people are ready to take their pensions and get out of Dodge. I've already heard many cases in the news where, any amount of integrity left in this institution is leaving. So what happens? You think they'll just be vacant positions? No. More bootlickers who just don't care what the arbitrary laws are. The police swear an oath to the Constitution, and then they go out arresting people for unconstitutional laws. This is my entire problem with the Constitution. It's not even as good as the paper it's written on anymore. Both sides, both Republicans and Democrats, poke holes in it whenever it suits their narrative or their agenda, and then they use the police force to go out and enforce their rules. It's funny, Republicans are not, they're not scot-free on this either. They were trying to get the, freedom of speech banned when I was a kid. This is where parental advisory stickers came from and such. Both right and left, should it suit their agenda, They arbitrarily strike things from the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and then they objectively try. And that's the thing about the entire system. There were supposed to be checks and balances. And I can't say that I'm brilliant enough to draft a better one. This is why I'm of the position that we need to start over from scratch, because more intelligent people than me need to help build an anarchist market society. But nevertheless, there's supposed to be checks and balances. When you get to the end of the line, who is deciding? The Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will eventually rule on constitutionality. Who are they subject to accountability? Themselves. It's arbitrary. It's arbitrary. And that's exactly what the Anti-Federalists said when the Constitution was originally brought forth. They were saying, no, this is going to grow out of control because when you draw it all the way down to the end of the line, they're only accountable to themselves, and they will for their own political gain and their own agendas, they will extend powers beyond belief. And thus it brings me back to our red wave argument. It is arbitrary. It is arbitrary to think that a bunch of Republicans in the House and the Senate, and even next year or whatever, or the next couple of years when we get a new president, that this will change anything. I'm all for any amount of liberty we can get back. So I'm not saying that, a bunch of Republicans is necessarily a bad thing. I just don't think it's a good thing. It's just like my opposition with Trump. Sure, it's better than Democrats. That's a low bar to set. That's a low bar. I don't see that as that's a non sequitur to me. That's a non-starter. That means nothing to me. Just because you're not worse than something does not mean you're better than it. I will take any amount of liberty for me and my daughter. That's my main focus. Anybody who knows me personally knows that the only thing I objectively worry about is my health and well-being and my mental health, so that way I'm okay for my daughter. This is something I learned in recovery. I have to be A1 upstairs if I want to be any kind of father to my daughter. When I first got sober, my daughter's mother asked me, would I want my daughter to grow up and be with somebody like me? And ever since I heard that, it changed me. I have been fighting my own inner demons daily because I don't want to be that person. I'm a couple weeks out from 5 years sober. In 5 years, I haven't been in any kind of legal trouble. I haven't used substances other than weed. I smoke weed. I used to drink on occasion, but even that's not a thing. But when it comes to the hard drugs that I was addicted to, I'm 5 years clean coming up. That's huge for me. I spent my entire life living in a victimhood and thinking that the government needed to take care of me. And now we're finally at a stage in society where everybody thinks this way. This intersectionality. Even liberal white women will figure out a reason on why they are oppressed. It's absurd. Even the poorest of poorest people in this country are better off than most people in the world. But the problem is we're going to let all of that go. All of that prosperity did not come from the government. Our rights, people think our rights come from the government. It's absurd. It literally states in the Constitution that these are God-given rights. And if you don't have a God, then they come from yourself. They are yours. You are the sovereign. People don't even know what sovereignty is these days. You ask them what sovereignty is, and they'll have to look it up. It means you are the arbiter for yourself. You get to choose whatever the sovereignty is addressing, whether it be finances or your kid's schooling or whatever. And that's what is absurd about calling somebody a domestic terrorist for wanting for their child. They are trying to make it the status quo that when your child enters the public institution by force, remind you, this is an edict. You will go to jail if you don't send your kid to some form of government-approved school, right? But if you choose to have any part in that process and you object to it, you are now a domestic terrorist. They are making it the status quo that your sovereignty over your children is now subverted to the state. They've already got the indoctrination down pat. I had to spend a decade untraining my indoctrination, believing that I was a victim and that the government was going to help me in some form or fashion. Having to untrain indoctrination is an amazing process because it gives you the perspective of both sides. On some things, I am still liberal. On some things, I'm fairly conservative. But most of all, first and foremost, is freedom. This is why I don't, I will try to objectively and logically argue with people or even have, just discussions with people. But even people who are right-leaning or Republicans or whatever, or even minarchists, there's still this belief that there's some form of government that is necessary. And that's fine if you hold that belief. But how? How do you constrain a government? Think about that. What is the best way to constrain a government? The best we've seen so far is this. And look at where it turned out to. If a fiscal plan, if an economic plan for our country, if Trump were to get elected and say, all right, we're going back to the economic policy of Barack Obama, right, which was a liberal economic policy, people would say, oh, well, the country's going to fail. We can't pull back that much spending and blah blah. Think about that for a second. We can't even go back, 10 years. If we were to revert 10, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, just like the people who were against the Constitution in the first place said was going to happen. Now, they thought this was going to dwindle away within inside of 3 decades. And it ended up lasting 250 years. But that's because people had faith and morals and ethics within inside of the system to a certain extent. Obviously, this country has not been perfect, and it never will be, because it is of a human nature. Anything human will not be perfect. This is the main objection, to anarchism. They say it's utopia. No, it's not utopia. It certainly isn't. It's like if you were to eradicate some kind of, let's say you could eradicate coronavirus right now. Would the world be perfect? No, of course it wouldn't. But it would be drastically better, correct? This is the correlation between anarchism and government. Is it going to make society perfect? No, of course not. There'll still be murderers. There'll still be robbers. But more people will have liberty. More people will have freedom. And of course, coupled with that comes individual responsibility, which in turn makes people at least think more morally, because all of their decisions come back to themselves. They can't obfuscate their responsibility. And the market has an amazing way of bringing equilibrium to whatever the market is. It's like, this is why I became an anarchist. Right there. That is why. Because if you think the government is inefficient and bureaucratic and tyrannical, right? And you think that the market can solve certain things that the government can't, if you take that to its logical conclusion, what do you get? Market anarchism. If you honestly believe that the market can solve problems that the government can't, the logical conclusion is anarchism. It is Ancapistan. I'll stop with that. By all means, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one.